Hello and welcome to Talking SoS with Shawn Riley, a video series on the science of security. This is episode 3, Cyber Resiliency Effects on Adversary Activities. This video presents a vocabulary for stating claims or hypotheses about the effects of cyber mission assurance decisions on cyber adversary behavior. Cyber mission assurance decisions include choices of cyber defender actions, architectural decisions, and selection and uses of technologies to improve cybersecurity, resiliency, and defensibility, i.e. the ability to address ongoing adversary activities. The vocabulary enables claims and hypotheses to be stated clearly, comparably across different assumed or real-world environments, and in a way that suggests evidence that might be sought but is independent of how the claims or hypotheses might be evaluated. The vocabulary can be used with multiple modeling and analysis techniques, including red team analysis, game-theoretic modeling, attack tree and attack graph modeling, and analysis based on the cyber attack lifecycle, also referred to as the cyber kill chain analysis or cyber campaign analysis. We'll focus in on 5 goals of the defender for building resiliency to adversary activity: redirect, preclude, impede, limit, and expose. We'll then further drill into each one of these to identify the sub-goals and further explore the intended effect, evidence, and other characteristics. The defender's goal: redirect. Direct adversary activities away from defender-chosen targets. Redirect can further be broken down into deter, divert, and deceive. Defender goal: deter. The intended effect of deter is to discourage the adversary from undertaking further activities by instilling fear of attribution or retribution, or doubt that those activities would achieve intended effects, i.e. that the target exists. The expected result of deter is that the adversary ceases or suspends activities. The effect on risk of deter: reduce the likelihood of occurrence. The evidence for deter: activities attributed to the adversary are no longer observed by the organization. Activities attributed to the adversary are no longer absorbed by other organizations, and this fact is made known through threat intelligence information sharing. An example of deter: the defender uses disinformation to make it appear that the organization is better able to detect attacks than it is, and is willing to launch major counterstrikes. The result is that the adversary chooses not to launch attacks due to fear of detection or reprisal. Defender goal: divert. The intended effect of divert is lead the adversary to direct activities away from defender-chosen targets. The expected result of divert: the adversary refocuses activities on different targets, i.e. other organizations, defender-chosen alternate targets. The adversary's efforts are wasted. The effect on risk of divert: reduce likelihood of occurrence. An example of divert: the defender uses selectively planted false information, disinformation, and honey nets, misdirection, to cause an adversary to focus its malware at virtual sandboxes, while at the same time employing obfuscation to hide the actual resources. The result is that the adversary's attacks are directed away from critical resources. Evidence of divert: adversary activities are directed towards defender-chosen alternate targets, i.e. to a special enclave. Activities attributed to the adversary are observed by other organizations and made known via threat intelligence information sharing. Defender goal, deceive. The intended effect of deceive: lead the adversary to believe false information about defended systems, missions, or organizations, or about defender capabilities or TTPs. Expected result of deceive: the adversary's efforts are wasted, as assumptions on which the adversary bases attacks are false. Effects on risk of deceive: reduce likelihood of occurrence and/or reduce likelihood of impact. An example of deceive: the defender strategically places false information, disinformation, about the cybersecurity investments that it plans to make. As a result, the adversary's malware development is wasted by being focused on countering non-existent cybersecurity protections. Evidence of deceive: adversary activities reveal that the adversary is relying on false information, i.e., a dummy account is spearphished, delivered malware is tailored to a simulated environment. Defender's goal, preclude, ensure that specific threat events do not have an effect. Preclude can be further broken down into expunge, preempt, and prevent. Defender goal, expunge. Intended effect of expunge: remove unsafe, incorrect, or corrupted resources that could cause damage. Expected result of expunge: the adversary loses a capability for some period. As adversary-directed threat mechanisms, i.e. malicious code, are removed, adversary-controlled resources are so badly damaged that they cannot perform any function or be restored to a usable condition without being entirely rebuilt. Effect on risk of expunge: reduce likelihood of impact of subsequent events in the same threat scenario. Example of expunge: the defender uses virtualization to refresh critical software, non-persistent services. At random intervals, temporal unpredictability. As a result, the adversary's malware that is implanted in the software is expunged. Evidence of expunge: removal of malware and/or privileges from adversary-controlled resources. Defender's goal, preempt. The intended effect of preempt: forestall or avoid conditions under which the threat event could occur or result in an effect. The expected result of preempt: the adversary's resources cannot be applied or the adversary cannot perform activities. Example, because resources are destroyed or made inaccessible. The effect on risk of preempt: reduce likelihood of occurrence and/or reduce likelihood of impact. Example of preempt: critical software is not assembled, adaptive management, or activated, non-persistent services, until it is needed. The adversary, therefore, cannot perform reconnaissance on and tailor malware targeted to the software. Evidence of preempt: the adversary's resources are observed to be denied, destroyed, made inaccessible, or unusable. Defender's goal, prevent. The intended effect of prevent is to create conditions under which the threat events cannot be expected to result in an effect. The expected result of prevent: the adversary's efforts are wasted. The assumptions on which the adversary based its attack are no longer valid, and as a result, the intended effects cannot be achieved. The effects on risk of prevent: reduce likelihood of impact. An example of prevent: subtle variations in critical software are implemented, synthetic diversity, with the result that the adversary's malware is no longer able to compromise the targeted software. Evidence of prevent. Logs or other captured data provide evidence that the activity occurred but had no effects. Defender's goal: impede. Make it more difficult for threat events to cause adverse impacts or consequences. Impede can further be broken down into contain, degrade, and delay. Defender goal: contain. The intended effect of contain is restrict the effects of the threat event to a limited set of resources. The expected result of contain, the value of the activity to the adversary in terms of achieving the adversary's goals, is reduced. The effect on risk of contain, reduce level of impact. An example of contain: the defender organizations make changes to a combination of internal firewalls and logically separated networks, dynamic segmentation, to isolate enclaves in response to detection of malware, with the result that the effects of the malware is limited to just initially infected enclaves. Evidence of contain: damage assessment in terms of scope, the number of affected resources, impact, a function of the number of affected resources and their value, i.e. their criticality, and duration and the mission or operational cost per unit time. Defender goal: degrade. The intended effect of degrade: decrease the likelihood that a given threat event will have a given level of effectiveness or impact. The expected result of degrade: the adversary achieves some, but not all, intended effects. The adversary achieves all intended effects, but only after taking additional actions. The effect on risk of degrade: reduce likelihood of impact and reduce level of impact. Example of degrade: the defender uses multiple browsers and operating systems, architectural diversity, on both end-user systems and some critical servers. The result is that malware that is targeted at specific software can only compromise a subset of the targeted systems. A sufficient number continue to operate to keep mission going, although in degraded mode. Evidence of degrade: the number of resources affected by the adversary is lower than for prior instances of this activity. The severity of the impacts caused by the adversary activity is less than for prior instances of the activity. Malware or other attack vectors attributed to the adversary are crafted and tailored based on failures of prior activities attributed to the same adversary to achieve effects. Repeated activities, example, to estimate information channels to start processes, are attributable to the same adversary. Defender goal: delay. The intended effect of delay: increase the amount of time needed for a threat event to result in adverse impacts. The expected result of delay: the adversary achieves the intended effect but may not achieve them within the intended period. The adversary's activities may, therefore, be exposed to greater risk of detection and analysis. Effects on impact of delay: reduce likelihood of impact and reduce level of impact. Example of delay: the protection measures, access control, encryption, allocated to resources increase in number and strength based on resource criticality, calibrated defense in depth. The frequency of authenticated challenges varies randomly, temporal unpredictability. and with increased frequency for more critical resources. The result is that it takes the attacker more time to successfully compromise the targeted resources. Evidence of delay. The length of time between an initial event and its effects, as determined by forensics or other analysis, is increased. Defender goal, limit. Restrict the consequences of threat events by limiting the damage or effects they cause in terms of time, system resources, and/or mission or business impacts. Limit can further be broken down into shorten and recover. Defender goal, shorten. The intended effect of shorten: limit the duration of a threat event or the conditions caused by a threat event. The expected result of shorten: the time period during which the adversary's activities have their intended effects is limited. Effect on risk of shorten: reduce level of impact. Example of shorten: the defender employs a diverse set of suppliers, supply chain diversity, for time-critical components. As a result, when an adversary's attack on one supplier causes it to shut down, the defender can increase its use of the other suppliers, thus shortening the time when it is without the critical components. Evidence of shorten: damage assessment in terms of time, the duration of an outage, or of degraded functionality. Defender goal, recover. The intended effect of recover: roll back the consequences of a threat event, particularly with respect to mission or business impairment. The expected result of recover: the adversary fails to retain mission or business impairment due to recovery of the capability to perform key mission or business operations. Effect on risk of recover: reduce level of impact. Example of recover: resources determined to be corrupted or suspect, integrity checks, behavior validation, are restored from a clean copy, protected backup, and restore. Evidence of recover: recovery in terms of metrics, including functionality, level of performance, typically expressed in terms of measurement of effectiveness, measurement of performance, key performance parameters, and recovery metrics for assurance, degree of trustworthiness or confidence in restored resources. Defender goal, expose. Reduce risk due to ignorance of threat events and possible replicated or similar threat events in the same or similar environments. Exposed can be further broken down into detect, scrutinize, and reveal. Defender goal, detect. The intended effect of detect: identify threat events or their effects by discovering or discerning the fact that an event is occurring, has occurred, or based on indications, warnings, and precursor activities is about to occur. The expected result of detect: the adversary's activities become susceptible to defensive responses. The effect on risk of detect: reduce likelihood of impact or reduce level of impact, depending on responses. Example of detect: the defender continually moves its sensors, functional relocation of sensors, often at random times, temporal unpredictability, to common points of egress from the organization. They combine this with the use of beaconing traps, tainting. The result is that the defender can quickly detect efforts by the adversary to exfiltrate sensitive information. Evidence of detect: adversary activities are detected or indicators, warnings, and/or precursor activities are observed. Defender goal, scrutinize. Intended effect. Analyze threat events and artifacts associated with threat events, particularly with respect to patterns of exploiting vulnerabilities, predispositioning conditions, and weaknesses to inform more effective detection and risk response. Expected result of scrutinize. The adversary loses the advantage of uncertainty, confusion, and doubt. The defender understands the adversary better based on analysis of adversary activities, including the artifacts, example malicious code, and effects associated with those activities, and on correlation of activity specific observations with other activities as feasible, and thus can recognize adversary tactics, techniques, and procedures. Effect on risk of scrutinize. Reduce likelihood of impact. Example of scrutinize. The defender deploys honey nets, misdirection. Inviting attacks by the defender, allowing the defender to apply their TTPs in a safe environment. The defender then analyzes malware and forensics analysis, the malware captured in the honeynet to determine the nature of the attacker's TTPs, allowing it to develop appropriate defenses. Evidence of scrutinize. Number and quality, example correctness, usefulness of malware signatures and characteristics. Number and quantity, example degree of confirmation of observables and indicators. Distinct threat actors and/or campaigns being observed. Defender goal, reveal. The intended effect of reveal. Increase awareness of risk factors and relative effectiveness of remediation approaches across the stakeholder community to support common, joint, or coordinated risk response. Expected result of reveal. The adversary loses the advantage of surprise and possible deniability. The adversary's ability to compromise one organization's systems to attack another organization is impaired, as awareness of adversary characteristics and behavior across the stakeholder community, example, across all computer security incident response teams that support a given sector, which might be expected to be attacked by the same actor or actors, is increased. Effect on risk of reveal. Reduce likelihood of impact, particularly in the future. Example of reveal. The defender participates in threat information sharing and uses dynamically updated threat intelligence data feeds, dynamic threat modeling, to inform actions, adaptive management. Evidence of reveal. Distinct threat actors, campaigns, and/or TTPs observed by multiple organizations. Degree of confidence in attribution of events to threat actors or campaigns. That's it for this episode of Talking SoS. See you next time, and thanks for tuning in.